This project is a follow-up to our mini AD project. I'll put a link at the top to that project. We're first going to deploy the mCloud mini AD instance in our VPC. When the mCloud AD instance gets created, we generate a series of user accounts with random passwords. These passwords and credentials are stored as secrets for use during the demo. Next, we deploy the Filestore instance using the cheapest tier, the basic HDD, which only gives us NFS v3 with a minimum provisioning capacity of 1 TB. Next, we create a Linux VM instance, which configures it to use the mini AD as our identity provider, so the users will show up here. Then we mount the file systems, the Filestore file system at /nfs and /home. In addition to mounting the file system, we also provision a Samba file server. And in that file server, we present the NFS and homes directories as SMB links on the Windows side. We'll map that as the Z drive. Finally, we deploy a Windows instance, and what we do is we install the Active Directory users and computers snap-in in here so you can manage your users of this instance. You can also see how the Samba gateway works, and it presents the NFS file system as the Z drive. Filestore is Google Cloud's managed NFS service. It is roughly comparable to Amazon EFS and Azure Files. There are several service tiers associated with Filestore, but there's really two families. The first family is the basic family, which is for smaller workloads and is not as performant. Then there is the enterprise family, which came along later. Now, what you'll find is they seem very different, the enterprise family versus the basic family, and that's because they're different technology stacks. Basic was developed by Google, and then they bought this company called Elastifile. So there are technology differences. And, the obvious one is Basic only supports NFS v3 and not NFS 4. And then the other ones are more performant and they support everything associated with NFS 4. Now, when I was costing this up for the lab environment, it seemed like it was very expensive. The thing about Filestore is you pay for provision capacity, not actual usage. And there's a very high minimum. You have a minimum of 1 TB for Basic, and most of them have either a minimum of a terabyte or more. And so for spinning up these lab environments, it is more expensive than the other cloud providers. So you could get away with a much cheaper EFS or Azure Files instance for a lab environment. For here, you got to provision 1 TB, and it's a little pricey. However, if you scale things up and you look at what does EFS charge for 1 TB, what does Azure Files charge for 1 TB per month, you'll find that the GCP offering is cost competitive, but at the sort of the base level, it is a little more expensive for labs and demos like we're doing. Now let's talk about the prerequisites. We have a video out there called GCP and Terraform Easy Setup. I'll put it at the top. That video walks you through creating a build identity and your account necessary for Terraform and extracting the credentials.json you'll need for the build. So what you need for this build, you need that Google Cloud account and that build identity we just talked about. You need the latest gcloud CLI, and then you also need the latest version of Terraform. Now we are ready to the build. So what I'm going to do is first going to clone the repository. So I'm going to copy this code right here. I'm going to go to my Ubuntu development environment, paste that in. Okay, so we've downloaded the code, and all our projects have this thing called check-env. So I'm going to go check-env, and it's going to go, hey, I need credentials.json. That goes back to the setup video. You need this JSON file. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to do upload, and I'm going to update my credentials.json that I have on my laptop. And now I should do check-env, and it's going to come back and say, hey, you're able to log in. Now, another thing that's GCP specific is there's specific APIs that you have to enable for this project. We have a script called API setup that you're going to want to run and enable all the APIs before you run the build. This takes a few minutes to run. So we've done check-env, we have done the API setup, and now we're ready to do the build. So I'm going to do apply.sh. The build takes between 10 and 15 minutes. As always, if you have any questions about this video or any comments, please leave it down below and I will answer your questions. So the first thing you want to do is bring up your GCP console, and in there I want to type in VM instances, After the deployment, we have 3 VM instances. The first is the mini AD instance. We have the whole video on that. I'm not going to cover that here. Then we have a Windows instance and an NFS gateway instance. But before we provision those, what we need to do is look at our file store. So you go to File Store. You're going to have the NFS file system, the basic HDD with NFS v3. So that's the second part. Once that's provisioned, we go back to our VM instances, and what's going to happen is the NFS gateway is going to get provisioned, and that when it gets provisioned, it joins to the AD, it mounts that file store stuff that we just looked at, then it's also going to deploy a Samba gateway server, and the Samba gateway server is going to mount or present the mount of NFS to Samba on the Windows side, so we let that provision. And then the last instance is the Windows AD instance, and that one is where you log in to manage users, and we'll log into that and show how the NFS gateway presents the file store data as the Z drive on the Windows server. So that's the main infrastructure. The other thing to keep in mind is for any of the demos, or if you want to play around with this solution, you have to go to Secrets. We're going to log in as John Smith. These are all the AD credentials and root credentials associated with this account. They're generated credentials. It'll be different for every build, so I'm going to show you something, but it's going to be totally different for your build. And I'm going to say View Secret, and you can see we've got the username and the generated password. That's what we'll use for the demos. For the demo, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect to the NFS gateway, and I'm going to use the built-in SSH provider. This provisions the local account, which is not part of AD. So what we want to do is we want to do sudo switch user to John Smith. And once we do that, I will do clear. Who am I? I am John Smith. If I do an ID, you'll see these are my AD credentials. My UID is 10,001. I'm in the mCloud users, and I'm in the Linux admins, which means I should be able to do sudo bash, and I have access. So that's the identity provider. The next is if you go to setRFS tab, you'll see we've got the different mounts here when the system boots. So we've got our file store instance. We have /NFS and /home. So let's go to /NFS, and we've got the data there. Also have in our home directory, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do nano greetings from Linux. This file was created in Linux. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we want to see how this file presents on the Windows side. So I'm going to get out of here. So we've got that. We've got the, if we look at realm list, you'll see the different services for Samba are running. So we're ready to actually look at on the Windows side. To interact with the Windows side, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Windows instance public IP address. So I'm going to copy that. And I am going to start a new session up here. And I'm going to do RDP. And I'm going to say I'm going to go to this guy. And we're going to do John Smith. And remember, we got to go back to our account here and look at secrets. Grab the John Smith secret. It's this big long thing here. And I'm going to go back to MOBA, and it's going to be mCloud J Smith. And I'm going to paste in that password from the other one. Once your desktop comes up, it takes a bit the first time you log in. You can go to the Windows admin tool, and you'll see in here that we have Active Directory users and groups. So I can click on here. And if I go into users and I sort by description, you can see all those users that we created are here in the sample users. There's sample users and sample groups, or we're logged in as John Smith. So that's it for the Active Directory management with the Windows AD instance. But we also want to go and look at the map drives. So if I go in the map drives, you'll see we have Z here as mounted. So I'm going to go to Z. I'm going to go to Home. And I go to John Smith. And remember that text file we did. It's greetings from Linux. Greetings from Linux. I'm saying this file was modified on Windows. So we'll do that. So you see that's direction. So what we'll also do is I'm going to bring up another file explorer. I'm going to go to see my computer, program files, Windows Media Player. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that into my Z drive and put it in data, and I'm going to paste that in. Okay, so I've pasted that in. If you go look at properties on this guy, it's going to show you security. It's going to show me mcloud user and John Smith. So it translates the Linux users from the Windows users very well. And so let's briefly go back to our Linux side. And let's go to the home directory. And let's say greetings from Linux. You can see the file has been modified. And then if I do NFS and data, you'll see Windows Media Player is there. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do rmfr, Windows Media Player. And now if we go back to our Windows instance, you can see it's gone. So we're operating on that shared file storage from Windows and Linux. One uses this SMB gateway, and the other one is a direct NFS mount. So at this point, we've covered everything we need to do in this project. So the only thing left to do is to be a good steward of your cloud accounts. And you're going to want to run the destroy script. Now, destroy also takes 10 to 15 minutes.